The scrape sounded like a fingernail on a chalkboard, a thin, metallic kiss against something that had been built to last. I remember freezing there on the gravel, the combine idling behind me like an old dog that knew trouble was coming, and seeing the woman step out of a black BMW like she owned every inch of the county line. That one scrape, that little, ridiculous scrape, lit a fuse that none of us saw coming. My name is Tom Mercer, and my family's been farming the Mercer Ridge for 4 generations. We don't have much in the way of flash, just a farmhouse with paint that's been stubbornly holding on, a handful of fields, and machinery that smells like diesel and stubbornness. Next door, at the top of the hill, there's Willow Oaks, a neat little subdivision with picket fences, gravel drives, and a homeowners association that likes rules the way some folks like coffee. Cynthia Blake ran that association. She loved her title more than she'd ever admit, loved the neatness, the control, the idea that if you could make everyone follow a rule, you could make everyone do what you wanted. At first it was small stuff. A polite note about excessive noise at dawn when we were harvesting, a request to keep our trucks off the paved road that technically split the properties, nothing that couldn't be shrugged off with a wave and a "we'll be careful." But there are kinds of people who find rules and turn them into weapons, and Cynthia was one of them. Soon enough, she had cones on the lane, cameras on mailboxes, and a spreadsheet of complaints that contradicted the truth like a bad photograph contradicts light. When the scrape happened, she was on the lane, one hand on her phone, filming, the other hovering like a conductor about to drop a baton. I walked up because, well, it was my combine. "You ruined my property," she declared into the camera, voice thin with righteous fury. "You can't just barrel through here with that thing." Her words were rehearsed. They had a ring of a woman who'd practiced indignation in the mirror. I tried to explain about the easement, the old right-of-way granted a century ago for farm access. She laughed like it was a bedtime story. "Easement? That's not how Willow Oaks works." So I did the one thing that keeps farmers calm. I started documenting. A camera here, a timestamp there, a call to the county to pull records. You'd be surprised how many problems look a lot smaller when you turn them into paper and pixels. I told Leah, my wife, who runs the books and can spot a forged invoice from 50 paces to hold on to every receipt, every photo. If Cynthia wanted a war by complaint, we'd meet her with receipts and timestamps and the kind of patience that eats away at performative fury. Patience is one thing, escalation is another. Cynthia escalated by adding a man in a fluorescent vest to the lane, then another, then fake hazard signs that made delivery trucks swerve. Someone dumped oil near the field gate one afternoon, enough to make it look like pollution, not accidental. A week later, a local inspector called. He stood in his boots and asked questions that sounded rehearsed, but his clipboard was empty. The cameras we'd installed caught more than just oil. They caught Cynthia crouched by the gate one night, looking like an actress who'd stayed after rehearsal. She'd staged the scene so carefully it read like a script. When the county survey came back, it was like someone lit a candle in a dark room and you finally saw the furniture. The old right-of-way, recorded and filed long before Willow Oaks put in its tasteful mailboxes, ran straight across a strip that Cynthia had landscaped into her garden. That 30-foot easement was legal ballast, the kind of thing that should have been obvious, but Cynthia had rewritten reality for the neighborhood with enough repetition that some people started to believe her version. That's when things turned from neighborhood politics to something colder. Leah pulled up HOA invoices and found a line item, landscape management consulting, paid to a shell company that had Cynthia's initials in the registration. We traced leases and receipts and found payments to a security outfit that delivered uniforms and a lot of muscle. Suddenly, the complaints weren't just about peace and property values. They had a funding stream and a plan. You'd think with paperwork and cameras and witnesses, rationality would step in. It didn't. Cynthia doubled down. She staged confrontations, posted edited clips to a neighborhood forum, painted us as aggressors for using a lane our family had used for decades. But the video, we had the grainy but undeniable footage of her pouring the substance near the gate, the time-stamped camera catching her face as clear as a portrait that was something she couldn't Photoshop out. The night of the collision was nobody's dream. I was heading back from the field. The sky had that thin, clear light of late summer. The lane was blocked with cones again, and there she was, standing by her BMW with a live stream running, headset clamped to her head, as if she were staging a reality show. When I slowed down to talk, she stepped in front of me like a wall. "Turn around," she said, voice syrupy and smug. "This lane is private." "It's an easement, Cynthia," I said, trying to keep my voice flat. "We have rights." "Your rights end where my property begins," she snapped. Her words were sharp enough to sting, but they were also a show. The viewers on her stream were commenting emojis and judgment and the kind of cowardly cheering that comes from being an audience. She got into her car like she was making a point. I should have known then that a point was all she cared about. She revved the engine, and for a second I thought maybe she'd back off. She didn't. She drove forward and hit the combine at a speed that could not be explained away as an accident. The metal screamed, my stomach dropped, and the live stream went from tens of viewers laughing to a dozen people in shock, the laugh track gone as quickly as it had come. I stood there with my hands in the air, feeling stupid and furious at once, as the deputies rolled in. Cynthia was arrested at the scene, handcuffs, procedural bruises, the kind of small humiliation people like her can't abide. The BMW was a crumpled sculpture. The insurance adjuster would later say reckless driving and intentional property damage, and we'd all nod like adults who understood what those words meant. In the weeks that followed the HOA meeting was a bloodletting. I'd prepared a folder the size of my forearm, survey maps, time-stamped camera files, bank records with Cynthia's shell company, text exchanges. We presented it not with drama, but with the serenity of someone who knows the math adds up. People watched the footage in silence. At first, there was the polite murmuring of neighbors who'd believed the polished complaint posts, and then the air tilted, conviction shifting like a landline being unplugged. What came next was a legal storm. Claims filed, counters filed, an auditor who laughed until he saw the bank ledger, and then stopped laughing. The shell company unraveled under the light of subpoenas. Cynthia's empire of petty groupthink, the cones, the faux safety posts, the staged odors collapsed because someone had the patience to keep receipts. We didn't dance through the field with champagne at the end. The law moves slow, and the scars stay. There were hearings, depositions, the long drip of paperwork, and a conviction that felt at once just and insufficient, like a bandage on something that had been bruised in the mind of the town. Cynthia paid fines, faced criminal penalties, and her name disappeared from the HOA board minutes like a stain wiped off a table. The community voted in a new board, and they voted in transparency audits, checks, a camera on the common funds. If you're wondering what I learned, and I think about that a lot when the nights are quiet and the tractors hum, it's this. People with titles can wield rules like weapons, and the only reliable defense is documentation, community, and the willingness to keep a slow, boring ledger while drama seeks to fast-forward the story. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels ordinary, and maybe that's the point. The quiet things add up. There are jokes, too. Leah still teases me about the time I almost started a neighborhood podcast instead of calling the sheriff. I laugh because sometimes the absurdity of it all is the only thing that keeps you human. And there are darker lessons. When a single person's sense of entitlement goes unchecked, it can reshape a community, warp the truth, and intimidate people who are only trying to feed families and pay bills. Today the lane is open. The combine runs when it needs to run, and the fields look like fields, honest in their green. Willow Oaks still has its neat fences and its coffee mornings, and people still gossip over trimmed hedges. But there's a new respect that wasn't there before, and that's quiet justice of a different kind. Not theatrical, not loud, just steady, the kind that keeps a farm in the family through storm seasons. I won't pretend everything is tidy, but when I look at the footage and the stacks of stamped envelopes, I know the truth of what happened. Truth is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's stapled into an envelope and dropped on a clerk's desk. If you've stuck with me this far, if you like stories where ordinary stubbornness wins out over performative power, drop your take below. Tell me what you think. Was it rightful pushback or bitter escalation? Do you side with the man who kept his family's land, or the woman who said the neighborhood needed rules? And if you've ever got a similar story, an easement fought over, a petty feud gone nuclear, share it. This town changed because people paid attention, because small records became a big truth, and because a scrape on a machine turned into a reckoning. I don't expect everyone to agree. I don't even want a consensus, I want conversation. So tell me, justice served, or a warning about letting power grow in secret?